They thought shoving my wife in front of me would make me cower. What they didn't know? I've spent a lifetime protecting others. And now they've made one fatal mistake. They picked the wrong woman. You'd think a fence post would be the least interesting thing on a quiet street. But that morning, it became the start of something I'll never forget. The sun wasn't even fully up yet, just that hazy gold light sliding over the rooftops. I was out by the east gate, wrench in hand, adjusting a loose bolt that had started rattling in the wind. It should have been a nothing task, 10 minutes, tops, but something felt off, like the stillness wasn't real, like the world was holding its breath. I didn't hear the truck until it crunched halfway down our gravel path. Then came the low growl of an engine throttled too high, too proud. A black side-by-side with tinted windows and a shiny HOA decal slapped across the windshield. Two men stepped out, both wearing tight polo shirts, clipboards in hand, like they were ready to sell me a timeshare or interrogate me over an oil spill. And then I saw her. Karen. Blonde, bone-dry blowout. Lips painted like she was headed to court or brunch. Maybe both. She walked behind them like a queen behind her soldiers, chin high, sunglasses on even though the sun wasn't fully awake yet. I straightened up, hands still dirty from the wrench. "Can I help you?" I asked. The tall one didn't answer, just looked past me at the gate like it had offended him personally. The shorter one flipped a page on his clipboard. "Unauthorized gate modification," he said flatly. "This structure doesn't comply with community harmony standards." I blinked. "You mean the hinge?" Karen finally spoke. "It's about the perimeter aesthetic. It doesn't align with the approved fence model." My wife, Leah, stepped out from the porch just then, still in her pajama pants. Her hair was pulled back, face bare. She looked tired, bone-tired. But when she saw them, something in her posture changed. She walked up beside me without saying a word. "You're on private land," she said calmly. "You don't have authority here without notice or approval." The tall guy shifted his weight. "We're acting under emergency HOA authority, Section 18D. "That's not real," she said. "There is no 18D. That's when he stepped forward. Too close. Too fast. I moved without thinking, stepped between them, hand up, instinct kicking in. But he brushed my arm aside like I wasn't even there and shoved Leah in the chest. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. She stumbled, fell backward onto the gravel. Her hands hit first, then her shoulder. And then the silence hit me harder than the shove. Because I'd seen everything, and done nothing. I didn't move at first. That's the part I keep replaying. Not the shove, not Leah hitting the ground, just the space between it. That sliver of time where my body refused to respond. It was like my brain blinked. Leah pushed herself up with one hand, the other still bracing her ribs. Her eyes wide, face pale. But no tears. No sound. Just breath. Tight, fast, stunned. And I just stood there. The tall enforcer stepped back like nothing happened. No apology. No hesitation. Karen adjusted her sunglasses. "Had you followed notice protocols, this wouldn't have escalated," she said, voice flat as concrete. That's when Leah laughed. It was sharp, short, no humor in it. She wiped a streak of dust from her cheek and stood. The gravel clung to her palm. Her knee was scraped red, pajamas torn. She didn't look at me, just kept her eyes on the man who pushed her like he wasn't worth blinking for. "You think that was enforcement?" she asked. Karen held up her phone, casually scrolling. "Your reaction is being documented. I suggest you de-escalate before this becomes a board-level violation." My hands were fists. I didn't remember making them that way. The tall guy shifted again, clearly watching me now. Ready, maybe. Waiting for an excuse. But Leah stepped forward. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the one protecting her. She was standing between them and me. The man who froze. The man who let it happen. Karen turned away like it was all settled. "We'll be in touch," she said, already halfway back to the side-by-side. Her minions followed. No backward glances, no concern, just swagger. Leah turned to me slowly. You saw that? She asked. I nodded, mouth dry. Yeah. Then why didn't you stop it? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I looked down at my hands. Still clenched, still useless. She didn't wait for an answer. She walked past me, gravel crunching under her bare feet, back toward the porch, back toward the house. Every step said don't follow. And I didn't. Because I didn't know what I'd say even if I did. I stayed out there another 10 minutes, just staring at the gate, the place she fell, the place I failed. Birds started singing like nothing happened, like it was just another morning, and maybe it was, for everyone but me. Karen came back later that afternoon, not in a suit, not in a blazer. In yoga pants and a windbreaker, like she'd just wrapped up a power walk and thought she'd stop by to ruin someone's life on the way home. She didn't knock. She stood at the end of the drive with her phone in one hand, a manila envelope in the other, and that same bored expression she wore like perfume. I opened the door, didn't step out. She held up the envelope like it was an eviction notice from heaven. You're being cited under Section 9B for hostile perimeter modification and non-uniform gate assembly. I stared at her. She continued, unbothered. And based on this morning's events, we'll also be opening an investigation into aggressive resident behavior. The board is concerned about safety. Safety, I repeated. You shoved my wife. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. I didn't lay a hand on anyone. Your guy did. They're certified code compliance enforcers. They're thugs. They're authorized. I stepped out onto the porch, slow. The boards creaked under my weight. Karen didn't flinch. Tell me, I said, what kind of HOA hires guys like that? Ones who shove women to the ground? She didn't blink. Ones who take community standards seriously. Behind me, the screen door creaked. I didn't have to turn around to know Leah was there. I could feel her eyes on the back of my neck like a spotlight, watching, measuring, still silent. Karen dropped the envelope at the edge of the porch like it might bite her. 72 hours, she said. Then daily fines begin, $150 per day, and a formal hearing is scheduled for next week. Then she left, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just turned and walked back down the drive like a mail carrier for misery. I didn't touch the envelope right away, just stared at it sitting there in the dust like a dare. Eventually, I picked it up. Heavy, printed, professional. Like this wasn't personal. But it was. Inside, the paperwork was thick. Photos of the gate, the hinge, a blurry shot of me from that morning, standing frozen while Leah sat on the ground. The caption read, Resident demonstrating non-compliance. I closed the file and leaned against the porch rail. Leah was gone. Door closed. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't about a fence. It wasn't even about rules. It was about power. And they just told me exactly where they thought mine ended. That night, Leah didn't say a word. She sat at the kitchen table for a while, moving a single spoon back and forth between drawers like it needed organizing more than we needed answers. I stood in the doorway, useless. She didn't look up. When she finally spoke, it wasn't a question. You froze. I didn't respond. Not just your body, your face, your hands, all of it. She looked at me then, not angry, not sad. Worse, disappointed. I walked over slowly, trying to read her expression, trying to explain something I hadn't figured out myself. I didn't expect it, I muttered. Didn't think he'd actually. But he did, she cut in. And you watched. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry. I'm not the one who needs it, she said, standing. Her chair scraped across the tile like a line being drawn. I'll be in the guest room. I nodded, but it felt like something snapped inside me. Not anger. Not guilt. Something heavier. After she left, I poured myself a glass of bourbon I didn't want, sat on the porch staring into the dark. The same gate, same gravel. But it all looked different now, like I was the outsider on my own land. I kept hearing her voice. You froze. The truth was, she wasn't wrong. I'd spent most of my life running toward trouble, toward chaos, toward screams, but this time, it came to me, and I didn't move. That kind of silence echoes. I finished the bourbon and poured another. I stayed there for hours, long after the wind died down, long after the horses went still. Even the cicadas seemed to quiet like they were waiting to see what I'd do next. Around midnight, I heard footsteps crunch the gravel. Walt. He carried a beer in one hand and a ham radio under his arm. Didn't say anything for a bit. Just dropped into the old lawn chair beside me with a grunt. I tapped into the HOA scanner, he said finally. They're calling you non-compliant, planning another sweep this weekend. Want to hear the codes? No. He nodded like he expected that. We sat there in silence, two old war dogs waiting for thunder. Sometimes it's not the punch that breaks you, Walt said, voice low. It's the one you didn't block. Then he stood and left. And I stayed. Still staring at the spot where Leah hit the gravel, still holding on to the shame that wouldn't let go. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Didn't sleep much anyway. Just drifted in and out while the floorboards creaked and the silence kept reminding me I was alone. Even with Leah in the next room, the house felt empty. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope from Karen spread open in front of me. Violations, citations, photos. All wrapped in that same smug formatting that made it feel like a form letter from the DMV, only with bruises. I started pulling out older notices. From the drawer under the sink. The one labeled HOA crap in Sharpie. There were dozens. Warnings about lawn height, fence maintenance, gate position. Even a letter about unauthorized livestock auditory interference. Which, translated, meant our rooster crowed too loud. Some of them were months apart. Some came back to back. But I saw something I hadn't seen before. The pattern. Every violation came after something else. Not random. Reactive. Like punishment. Like we were being watched and tested. Step out of line, get the hammer. It wasn't just us either. I pulled out my notebook. Started listing names. Mr. Hollis down the road, fined for painting his shutters the wrong shade of beige after speaking out at a board meeting. The Patel family, ticketed for non-standard garden layout, after hosting a Diwali celebration. Old Mrs. Jenkins, 3 citations in 1 week after she asked Karen why the HOA dues kept going up with no explanation. Each time someone pushed back, they got hit harder. This wasn't a system, it was a pattern of control. I stepped outside with the file and looked around the neighborhood. Everything looked peaceful. Green lawns, birds chirping, morning sprinklers misting the sidewalks. But it wasn't peace. It was fear wearing a friendly face, and I realized something. Karen wasn't enforcing order, she was punishing defiance, and we had become the next target. I walked the perimeter of our property, slow. Gate to barn to chicken coop to the creek line. The land had always been my refuge, my anchor. But now it felt exposed, like I was walking a stage built for someone else's show. That's when I heard the low hum. Drone, small, fast, probably no bigger than a shoebox, but it hovered just high enough to watch, just low enough to taunt. It zipped across the edge of our fence line, paused, and disappeared. And that's when it really clicked. This wasn't about fixing gates, it was surveillance. And someone was watching a little too close. Walt showed up around noon, like he always did when something felt off in the air. He didn't knock. Just walked around back with a box of tools, a dented thermos, and that look on his face like a raccoon that had sniffed out a lie. You see the drone? He asked. Yeah, I said. Buzzed me like it knew my schedule. He nodded like that confirmed something. Not a hobby rig, military repurposed, probably bought secondhand off a collector or a cousin with poor judgment. Karen's running surveillance now? Walt chuckled, humorless. Karen's not smart enough to fly it, but she's smart enough to hire someone who is. We moved to the barn, out of the sun. Walt spread out a tablet with a cracked screen and showed me a folder labeled Crow's Nest. It was full of video files, angles from above, low sweeps, heat maps of the neighborhood. My house was in half of them. How'd you get this? I asked. Tapped into their drone uplink, caught the signal last week, thought they were testing a lawn mapping system. Turns out they were testing you. I watched one clip, me fixing the south fence, Leah walking barefoot in the garden. Then a still frame, my face, up close, zoomed and labeled, non-compliant male resident, monitor escalation potential. My stomach turned. This isn't just surveillance, I said, it's profiling. Bingo, Walt said, and guess who set it up? He tapped another folder. It opened to an invoice. Dobbs Tactical Solutions, Ray Dobbs. A name I hadn't said in over a decade. Not since the desert. Not since Ghazni province. The kind of name that doesn't echo, it detonates. You know him? Walt asked, already knowing the answer. We served together. Friend? No. He whistled low. Karen brought in a merc. Worse, I muttered. She brought in a guy who thinks he's still at war. Walt sat down on a hay bale and rubbed his jaw. Why would he take this job? HOA contract? That's not exactly Black Ops material. He's not here for the paycheck, I said. He's here for me. Silence settled thick between us, and I felt it again. That pull in my chest. That line I thought I buried. Walt broke the silence. So what now? I looked out the barn window. The drone buzzed past again, slow, watching. Now? I said. Now I draw a line. And this time, if they cross it, they won't walk back over it. The thing about Ray Dobbs is, he was always the kind of guy who liked making noise just to see who flinched. Back in the service, it didn't matter if it was a mission or a mess hall. Ray played war like it was a sport. Loud, reckless. Always pushing limits just to see who would snap first. And when he finally did, when things went sideways in that compound outside Ghazni, I was the one who filed the report that ended his career. Didn't do it out of spite. Did it because someone had to. Because a woman and her son ended up face down in the dirt for holding a shiny pot lid Ray thought was a weapon. The boy was 10. The woman didn't even have time to scream. Ray walked out of that room breathing hard, like he just scored a goal. I never forgot that look. So when I saw his name on that invoice, when I realized he was working for Karen, something old twisted in my gut. This wasn't just a neighbor dispute anymore, it was personal. I didn't tell Leah, not yet. She was still walking around like a ghost, bruises healing but not fading. Every time I tried to talk to her, she gave me one-word answers and closed doors with surgical precision. Not angry, just done. So I told Walt. He leaned back in his chair and scratched his beard. Ray Dobbs, he muttered. Explains the muscle, the surveillance, the sudden shift from HOA tickets to tactical visits. He doesn't care about fence codes, I said. No, he cares about leverage. We sat there for a while, watching the sun crawl across the barn floor. I thought about the timeline. When the violations started, when Ray likely got involved, it lined up too clean. You think he came looking for me? I asked. Or Karen found him, Walt said. Maybe through one of her private contractors. Maybe she Googled how to scare veterans legally, and he showed up. I shook my head. Ray doesn't just show up, he plans. And if he's circling me now, he's already deep into something. Walt stood and poured us each a finger of something that smelled like gasoline and regret. You ready to fight him again? He asked. No, I said, raising the glass. This time I'm not waiting for him to take the first swing. And somewhere out there, I knew Ray was smiling. Because that's exactly what he wanted. I spent the next day walking the perimeter of our land like I was learning it all over again. Not for beauty, not for peace, for strategy. Every dip in the terrain, every spot where the trees thinned, every loose fence post. I saw it not as property, but as a battlefield. And I wasn't thinking in terms of days anymore. I was thinking in terms of minutes, seconds, entry points, cover, escape. That's what Ray had done to me. Turned a quiet ranch into a chessboard. And Karen? She was the queen behind it all. Moving pieces. Pretending her hands were clean. I found myself at the East Gate, the one Leah and I built together our second year on the land. Back when the world still felt soft. When we still laughed while digging post holes and argued about whether the hinges should be matte or gloss. That gate used to mean welcome. Now it was a target. I reinforced the latch, added an extra crossbeam behind the gatepost. Not because it would stop anyone like Ray, but because it would slow him down. A delay buys time. And time, when everything else is against you, is gold. Walt came by in the afternoon with a box of metal bits, and a look in his eye I hadn't seen in a while. You setting traps? He asked, nodding at the gate. No, I said. I'm setting boundaries. He smirked. Same thing, really. Together we worked the line. Tripwire placements, bottle caps tied to string, quiet alarms only we'd notice, cameras hidden in birdhouses, angled just so. Walt even had a motion sensor hooked up to his old weather station. He tapped the screen. This baby will tell us wind, barometric pressure, and whether someone's trying to sneak through your fence at 3 a.m. while wearing bad cologne. I cracked half a smile. You always this prepared? Only when the stakes are real. By sundown, the land felt different. Not safe, not untouched, but ready. I stood on the porch, hands on my hips, eyes scanning the horizon. And for the first time in days, I felt something that almost resembled control. That's when I saw her, Leah, watching me from the front window, expression unreadable, not impressed, not scared, just still, like she didn't know if she was watching a man protect her, or watching a man prepare for war. I didn't wave, she didn't blink, and in that silence between us, a truth settled deeper than any threat ever could. The next move wasn't mine, it was theirs. They came back 2 days later. Not at night, not hiding in the shadows like smart people with something to lose. No. They showed up at 4:37 p.m., middle of the day, broad sunlight, like it was just another neighborly visit about flower beds and mailbox colors. 3 of them this time. Ray, of course. Smirking like always. Bruise still coloring his jaw from whatever fight he picked last. Some new guy, young, square-jawed, probably ex-military, or at least trying to look like it. Tactical vest, mirrored glasses, boots too clean for this much gravel. And then there was Karen. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, glasses bigger than her face. Clipboard hugged against her chest like it had a Bible inside. She wore this smug expression like she was already halfway through writing her victory speech. They didn't stop at the end of the drive this time. They walked all the way to the gate. I stepped off the porch, slow and quiet, boots crunching gravel like punctuation marks. No weapons, no raised voice, just presence. Afternoon, I said. Karen didn't return the greeting. You're in violation of 3 separate perimeter codes. Emergency Addendum 19F gives the board temporary enforcement authority. That note card in your hand isn't a badge, I said calmly. Ray stepped forward. This ain't about paperwork. I stared straight at him. That's where you're wrong. He didn't blink, just tilted his head. So what's your move, Ellis? Gonna cry foul again? Run to your little county records office? I already ran, I said. Years ago. In places where men like you didn't just push people, they buried them. His smirk faltered. Karen cut in. We're here to document the violations, that's all. Unless you want to make it something else. Leah stepped outside just then. She didn't say a word. Just stood in the doorway. Barefoot again. Hair tied back. One hand resting gently on the porch frame. The bruise on her cheek had faded, but not enough to forget. Ray noticed her. His eyes flicked from her face to mine. I saw it. That flicker. Like he remembered what happened last time, and suddenly, he looked small. Karen raised her phone to take a picture. And that's when it happened. A low crack from the far fence line. One of Walt's tripwires. Ray's head snapped toward the sound. But I didn't flinch. Because this time, I wasn't freezing. I was waiting. And they had just stepped onto the wrong kind of stage. They never saw it coming. The first thing to go was the sound. Not the shouting kind, not yelling or orders. The other kind. That strange, low hum of distortion, crackling through hidden speakers Walt had rigged behind the barn. A sound built from reversed police sirens, mangled radio chatter, and garbled voices scraped from old war recordings. Karen froze mid-step, her phone still raised. Ray's shoulders tensed. The new guy? He panicked. He reached for something, maybe a flashlight, maybe just his nerve, but the second his foot crossed the gravel line by the gate, the net dropped. Walt's design, fishing-grade filament, pulley rig, counterweight hidden under the rain barrel. It snapped up with a hiss, tangled Ray at the knees, and yanked him face first into the dirt. The new guy lunged forward instinctively, trying to help. Wrong move. A rigged bucket swung from the rafters of the porch, slammed into his chest with a wet smack. Homemade deterrent, half fish oil, half cayenne, all humiliation. He stumbled backward, gagging, fell directly onto one of the motion plates hidden in the gravel. Boom! Flash pop. A white-hot burst from a modified aerosol can Walt had jury-rigged like a redneck grenade. Karen screamed. High, sharp, real. She dropped the clipboard, spun in place, slipped, caught herself on the porch rail with one shaking hand. Ray rolled over, coughing in the dirt, tangled in mesh, glasses crooked, pride shattered. And me? I stepped forward. No words. Just boots hitting gravel like war drums. Steady, controlled. I walked up to Ray and planted one foot on his vest. Firm. Final. You crossed the line, I said. He looked up, eyes watering from the flash. You planned this. No, I said. You planned to escalate. I just planned to stop you. Karen tried to recover her voice. This is assault. This, I cut in, is defense. You walked past your rights when you walked past my gate. The new guy was on his hands and knees, crawling through a puddle of fish oil and regret. Karen staggered back to her feet, hair frizzed, sunglasses gone. You'll regret this, she hissed. No, I said. You will. She stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was bluffing or if I really was the man she thought she could push around. And then, without another word, she turned, stumbled toward the side-by-side. Ray followed, limping. The rookie didn't even look back. They left like thieves, bruised, beaten, and this time, silent. Leah had watched the whole thing. From behind the screen door, arms folded across her chest, expression carved from stone. Not shock, not fear, just calculation. I walked up the steps, still breathing hard, shirt soaked, hands stinging from the adrenaline. I'd barely touched anyone, but my knuckles felt tight like they remembered how far I almost went. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes dropped to my boots, still wet with fish oil and dirt, then back to my face. That's not the man who didn't stop them, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut deep. She turned and walked back inside. Door didn't slam, just clicked shut with the kind of finality you don't argue with. I stood there for a moment, let it sink in. The man who didn't stop them was gone. But in his place? Something else had stepped forward, something colder, harder. And the worst part? I didn't hate it. I sat on the porch after that, didn't drink, didn't move, just stared at the gravel where Ray had landed. The twisted net still half-piled, the empty bucket rocking slightly in the breeze. Walt texted. All systems recorded. You want a copy? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want one, but because I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet. My hands were still shaking, not from fear, from restraint. That's what scared me most. Not that they came. Not that I was ready. But that part of me, buried for years, wasn't just prepared. It was eager. I washed up in the barn sink. The water ran red at first, from rust, not blood. But it looked the same in the drain. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched long across the field. And I could feel something in the air start to shift. Like the land itself had witnessed what happened and wasn't sure whether to be proud or afraid. Inside, Leah's door was shut. Locked this time. The porch light flicked off behind me. Not on a timer. She'd turned it off herself. A message, whether she meant it or not. I wasn't just defending us anymore. I was becoming something else. And she'd noticed. I stood outside that door for a long time, listening to the house settle, listening to my own breath. Then I walked away. Back to the porch. Back to the spot where the fight had ended. And maybe where something else had started. Because I wasn't just drawing lines anymore. I was crossing them. The spin came fast, faster than I expected. By morning, the video was everywhere. Not our footage, not the full context. Just 30 seconds of chaos, ripped straight from a drone's eye, Ray hitting the dirt, a bucket slamming a man's chest, Karen screaming, and me stepping forward like a warlord with boots made of vengeance. No lead-up, no line crossing, no assault on Leah. Just the trap. Just me. The HOA posted it to their community page with a caption that read, "Escalation by unstable resident. Legal action pending." A local blogger ran it under the headline, "Militant homeowner sets war trap for HOA volunteers." The comments came next. Some called me a lunatic. Some said I should be arrested. A few thought it was staged. None of them saw the bruise on Leah's face. Or the silence in her eyes after it happened. Or the way Karen's enforcers shoved her like she was a warning sign, not a person. Walt came by around noon, thermos in one hand, tablet in the other. "They've framed it," he said, dropping into the chair next to me. "No surprise there. Got legalese all over it. Claims of premeditated deterrence, terms like booby trap and lethal intent." I didn't respond. He tapped the tablet. "They're building a case. Probably gonna file civil suit, maybe criminal if they get a judge soft enough." "They think I care about a court?" "No," he said. "They think you'll break under one." I took the tablet and watched the footage again. My face, calm, determined, boot on Ray's chest. Without context, it looked bad. With context, it looked like justice, but justice doesn't trend. And that's what Karen knew. I heard Leah's voice behind me, not speaking to me, but on the phone. Calm, controlled, lawyer voice engaged. Then the door shut again. Not loud, just definite. Walt leaned forward. "You want to hit back online? I've got raw footage, full context. We can dump it in 3 hours, Reddit, YouTube, local forums." "No? Why not?" "Because I don't win by posting." He raised an eyebrow. "Then how?" I stood, walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the same fence I'd once built with bare hands and borrowed lumber. The same one now covered in camera wires and baited triggers. "I don't fight them where they're strong," I said. Walt nodded slowly. "We go legal?" I didn't answer. Because the answer was already decided. This wasn't about fighting back anymore. It was about dismantling the whole damn game. I made 3 calls that night. One to my old friend Jack, a county records officer who owed me a favor. One to Walt's cousin Mia, a civil rights attorney with a bite sharp enough to chew through iron. And one to a guy I never thought I'd call again. Benny Ramos, private investigator, former Fed, and professional bloodhound. I didn't post, didn't argue in the comments, didn't feed the fire. Because I wasn't trying to win a debate. I was preparing a strike. Walt delivered a thumb drive the next morning. Raw footage. Everything from the tripwire to the scream. Time-stamped, synced with Leah's medical visit. "You get her consent?" I asked. She gave it without asking. Said make it matter. That hit harder than I expected. I sat down with Mia later that day. We didn't meet in an office. She came to the ranch, stood barefoot in the grass, and watched the chickens like they were witnesses. "You're being sued for 75 grand, she said, flipping through a folder like it was a grocery list. "But that's the distraction. What's the real play? Control," she said. "They want to bankrupt you, smear you, isolate you. But they're sloppy. Your HOA's a legal mess wrapped in bureaucracy and tied with a ribbon of corruption." She laid out a simple plan. One I hadn't dared consider. "We file first, preemptively. False impersonation of authority, trespass under color of law, malicious enforcement. We use the drone footage, the injuries, the audio." "What audio?" Walt grinned. "Remember that mic I said I left running?" Mia's smile was razor thin. "Ray said, use the wife, he'll snap. Clear as day." That did it. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not rage, purpose. We filed the complaint the next day, through Mia's firm. Sharp, legal, ruthless. And we didn't send it to just the HOA. We sent it to the county board, to the local news, to the State Bar Association. Then we waited. Not long. Karen went silent online. No Facebook updates. No Nextdoor posts. No community updates. Ray disappeared from the HOA directory. Benny dug up his background. 3 LLCs tied to security companies that never made it past a year. 1 active warrant out of Nevada. Walt poured 2 bourbons that night. "You just pulled the pin," he said. "No," I replied. "I just threw the grenade." And somewhere in that silence, I finally felt like I wasn't the one under siege, not anymore. The courtroom was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect, but the kind that says everyone's waiting to see who draws first. Karen walked in with 3 lawyers flanking her like bodyguards. All of them in sharp suits and expensive shoes, acting like they were about to argue a tax loophole instead of justify violence on a front lawn. Me? I wore clean boots and a button-down shirt. No tie, no theatrics, just truth. Mia stood next to me, calm as stone. Her folder was half the size of theirs. She didn't need weight, she had precision. The judge, a man with salt and pepper hair and a tired expression, flipped through our filing for exactly 28 seconds before looking up. "This is about a perimeter gate?" he asked deadpan. Karen's lead attorney leaned in. "Your Honor, this is about a pattern of escalating hostility by the defendant." "No," Mia said, already stepping forward. "This is about an HOA authorizing unauthorized personnel to enter private land and assault a resident." She handed over 1 single flash drive. "Drone footage," she said. "Full timeline, audio included." The judge plugged it into the monitor like he'd done this 100 times. The room dimmed, the video played, and the mood shifted. There was Leah, calm, standing firm. Then the shove, then the fall, then the silence, then me, not attacking, just frozen. The next segment showed Karen's second visit, the crossing of the line, the net, the chaos, the fish oil. The judge watched all of it without blinking. Then he stopped the video and leaned back. He looked at Karen, then at her lawyers, then at me. "This should have never reached this room," he said quietly. He scribbled something on a pad, then handed it to the clerk. "Injunction granted. HOA enforcement powers suspended. All related fines vacated. Civil protection order issued for both residents. Defendant is cleared of any wrongdoing." Karen's face didn't fall. It shattered. She didn't look at me, didn't speak. She just stood, stiff, robotic, and walked out of the courtroom like someone heading into a storm without an umbrella or a plan. Mia exhaled slowly. Not a victory sigh, just release. We stepped outside. The air felt lighter. The sun was warm again, but I wasn't smiling. Because I knew what justice looked like. And this wasn't it. This was just correction. Karen had played her game for too long, and now she wasn't just exposed. She was done. Karen didn't say goodbye, didn't post a farewell to the HOA Facebook group. Didn't host a last-minute community reset Zoom call. She just vanished. Moving truck came on a Tuesday. Boxes loaded in silence. By Thursday morning, her house was empty, except for a cracked birdbath, a faded lawn sign, and a mailbox left hanging open like a mouth still mid-lie. The rumor mill kicked in fast. Family emergency. Transfer to a gated community. Early retirement in Arizona. But Walt summed it up best. She got booted from the kingdom she built, he said, and she didn't even get to pack her crown. Ray disappeared too. No forwarding address. No more patrols. No clipboard goons taking pictures of grass. Just silence. And it was strange. Peace wasn't noisy. It was absence. For a while, I didn't know what to do with that. I removed the tripwires first, then the net, then the speakers behind the barn. The land didn't fight back. It breathed again, stretched, waited. The American flag went back up the pole one morning before sunrise. Same one Leah and I raised together the year we bought the place. Same frayed edge, same quiet pride. That afternoon, Leah joined me on the porch. She didn't say much. Didn't have to. We just sat. In silence. Together. Not close. Not distant. Just there. Eventually she asked, "Do you feel safe again?" I thought about it. Then shook my head. "No, but I feel ready." She nodded once, like that was the best answer I could have given. Better than pretending. Better than false peace. Later that week, I found a note on our gatepost. No name. Just a line scribbled in rough ink. "Thanks for standing up when the rest of us couldn't." It wasn't a thank you. It was a confession. People had seen, watched, waited, and they were tired of waiting too. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because this land? It wasn't just mine anymore. It was a message. And the message was simple. There is a line. And you don't cross it. I'm not the man who froze anymore. Not the soldier who came home to quiet and let the noise build around him. I'm not the guy who gets caught off guard or waits for justice to knock politely. I'm the consequence. And now? Now the whole damn neighborhood remembers what happens when you forget who you're dealing with.